Hello and welcome to the Property Roundup here on iPropertyRadio with myself, Carol Tallon, the show where we chat to industry experts to get a view and activity on the ground and to learn about new trends emerging. This show is sponsored by daft.ie, Ireland's most visited property website. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Mary Conway, Chairperson of the Irish Property Owners Association and Judge at the National Property Awards 2024. Mary, you're very welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Carol. Nice to be here.
So, Mary, you're a regular guest on the show. We've spoken to you in the past about your own business, Janus Estates, where we've talked about right sizing, and it's something that's particularly topical at the moment. Most regularly, we talk to you in your capacity as chairperson of the Irish Property Owners Association, because we know that this is such an evolving area of policy and legislation. We need to tap into you and your membership to understand what's happening on the ground on a regular basis. But today, our focus is slightly different. We're going to talk about, I feel like we address the challenges a lot. Today, we're going to talk about what's good across estate and letting agencies and across the property industry in general. And we're doing that, speaking to you in your capacity as judge at the Business Post National Property Awards. And they're coming up at the end of this month, February 29th, in the Intercontinental in Dublin. So tell us first, how did you come to be involved in the National Property Awards?
Don't know. I got an invitation out of the blue last year to do it, and I really enjoyed it. I felt completely out of my depth, and then I was kind of surprised when I was asked back this year, but delighted to do it because you can just kind of get focused on your own area in the property industry, which is estate agency, or letting or block management or whatever. And there's so much good out there that you really don't know about until you actually go through all the submissions. And there were some amazing submissions. And the really nice thing this year, I think, was there seemed to be more applicants from around the country. So, it's not just the Dublin Property Awards anymore. It's the All Ireland. And I know it's been the National Property Awards, but I think sometimes people down the country feel, oh, I can't go up against the Dublin boys or whatever. And they're doing really nice things and really great things on the ground. So lovely to see participation from around the country.
Do you know what? I completely agree with you. I feel like I spend all day, every day, kind of dealing with some of the challenges and the negatives, some of the more challenging aspects. And yet, my day job is to try tell the good stories around placemaking, planning, property, construction, the delivery of great projects. And we have so many good stories to tell that sometimes it's actually quite frustrating for me that you could have 6 good news stories, 1 negative news story, and it's the negative news story that carries. And, so it's something that I've always been aware of. And for that reason, when the National Property Awards started a couple of years ago, we were asked to get involved in the inaugural awards, and we said, yes, please. And we grabbed the opportunity with both hands, because I feel so passionately that, having been in the industry for now 23 years. I really feel like I'm aging myself when I say that now, but I feel like we've come through a lot. And one of the things I've noticed, and it's true across property and construction, maybe even more so through construction, that since the crash, I feel like the industry has been a really poor advocate for itself. I feel like standards have improved. It's so tightly regulated, and yet we sometimes allow negative perceptions to prevail. I think the industry has just been really poor at advocating for itself. And we saw that change, particularly in the construction industry, where capital projects running over budget times, that these negative news stories go unchallenged. And actually then when we look behind the scenes of that, we see, okay, well, there are project changes, there are contractual changes that feed into things like this. And only last year, the RTE, with their expose on how property developments are stymied by essentially false and corrupt objections, I think that was a real eye-opener for the general public. And yet nobody in the industry was surprised. So is it a case that we have just essentially allowed ourselves to be almost misaligned, and reputations really put out in such a negative way since the crash? And I'm asking you this, I suppose, in your capacity of the Irish Property Owners Association. You work with a huge number of landlords. And yet landlords are leaving the industry because of so many reasons that we've discussed in the past. But it's an industry that has never been celebrated, certainly not in the past few decades. Has it ever been celebrated in Ireland for the service they provide? I think not.
Not. We had the IPOA was 30 years since its formation last year, and we had a lovely lunch back in the autumn. And it was a really nice chance for members to get together. Now, we do have AGMs and we've meetings around the country and all the rest, and everybody's in at 7 o'clock and they're gone out by 9 o'clock. But this was really nice. We had some really good industry speakers. We had a lunch. People stayed on afterwards for talking. But for the most part, landlords are afraid to put their face over the parapet and say, look, I'm a landlord, because there's so much bad press about it. And I just know from my work with landlords and as an agent, there's some amazing landlords out there with fantastic properties, but you only ever hear about the 30 to a house or
Mm.
whatever, because that suits some people's agenda. So, what struck me about the awards, and I wouldn't know a huge amount about property development or building of estates or whatever. But, it was very much, I suppose, when I was buying a house 30 years ago and you bought in a new estate, you bought a new house and you were in an estate and you probably moved in with other people who were starting out for the first time and you grew as a community yourself. But what seems to be different now is that they're building a community around the estate. They're putting in all the nice bells and whistles that were afterthoughts in previous developments. And I don't think that really comes out so much in the media. It's just from listening to the people who submitted their applications. And you think, God, this would be a really nice place to live because they've put thought into it.
I actually I think you've nailed it there just in terms of community, because we talk
Mm,
about delivering houses, but at the end of the day, irrespective of the tenure, so whether it's for public or private, social, affordable, or home ownership, the reality is we're all the time trying to deliver good communities. And
mm,
actually, I think Irish property developers have always been very good at that. Definitely during the Celtic Tiger years, the standards dropped, but we always had leaders who were very good at that, and they're the brand name developers that we still have today, and they're the people who are building world-class developments in Ireland and outside of Ireland. And that ethos hasn't changed. So I think maybe what's happened is regulation has pushed some of the guys who maybe weren't in it for the right reasons and weren't delivering great schemes out. And so that is to be welcomed, because we end up that, we still have maybe the best developments going forward. And, the holistic nature of how we're planning now really does fall under
mm.
placemaking. We're not just trying to deliver homes. It's not just about units anymore. It is the placemaking element. And actually, the National Property Awards, I think, has the widest range in award categories recognizing that. So
Mm.
actually for this year, so yes, you've got the ones you might expect, like the Irish Agency of the Year and the marketing of the year. And I really enjoy when we have we look at leaders in the industry and future leaders.
Mm.
I'm actually really excited about the future leaders in the industry category this year, because whether it's planning, construction, or across property and real estate in general, it can be difficult to attract new talent into the
Mm.
industry. And I'm not sure if, me going out with my middle-aged message saying, no, seriously, it is a good industry, come join us. That's not inspiring the next generation. I'm not fooling anybody. But I think when we see through the apprenticeship programs, and we've done
Yes.
shows on that with I Am Sold and others, and we've spoken to people who've come up through the apprenticeship route, and we're seeing some of the future leaders. I'm really excited about that. Are you seeing through the Irish Property Owners Association or through Janus Estates, do you get to see, is there an appetite for newcomers, whether they're coming in at an agency level or a landlord level? Are you seeing young new talent coming into the industry?
So much as landlords. There are some guys that I've worked with that are new landlords and they're delivering amazing projects. And for the most part, these are guys with backgrounds in construction. And they have thought about what somebody needs in a house. And we're not talking about family homes here. We're talking about bigger houses of multiple occupancy, or a house that a company would take to rent to their workers. And these are like mini hotels in a lot of cases. It's got the 200 channel. There's one landlord in particular I can think of. He's rolled out a few of these in the last few years. It's a big kitchen, 2 hobs, 2 ovens, so that there's nobody fighting when they come home from work in the evening. They've televisions, the rooms are all en suite, they've temperature controlled rooms. You never see these guys kind of getting, all you hear about is the awful slum landlord with the dirty house or whatever. But the new guys coming in are doing really good work. But, with taxes and everything, are they going to stay?
Look, I think that's a fair question, and it's something that the IPOA is doing a really good job flying the flag of. But I just don't know our policy makers listening. But believe me, on the media side, I'm particularly frustrated to see that it's the negative stories that rise to the top. By the way, I'm also very conscious that we're two females talking about this, and yet we keep saying guys. So actually, I think we need to acknowledge that there's still quite a gender imbalance across the industry, whether it's, again, planning, construction, real estate. We're still not getting kind of the level that we need in terms of diversity. And I hope that's something that changes actually when we're welcoming the next generation in. Just looking at the apprenticeship program, there definitely seems to be a better gender balance for real estate and for planning, maybe not so much for construction, but maybe offsite and modern methods of construction as we lean more towards manufacturing. I think that might help, but it's probably going to take a number of years. Mary, I've never been an estate agent or a letting agent. You have, and you've been doing this for a long time. How was it for you looking at the applications for, say, teams of the year, agencies of the year, looking and at property managers? And, what can you kind of tell us about best practice in Ireland? It's a heavily regulated area.
Yeah.
Is that what's driving it?
No, I don't think so. I'm sure it is to a degree, but I think there's just some people out there who are very innovative and are looking at what's going on in the States and Australia and the UK, and are kind of, I suppose, modeling some of their practice and integrating it. Some of the property management stuff I was really impressed with, in relation to cost savings for the blocks and things like that, and for the owners. And everybody's just kind of thinking forward all the time. I suppose the green agenda is very much on people's minds, that energy costs went so high last year. So, how can we cut back? How can we make savings for the owners? And then I suppose with regards to marketing and advertising, the use of social media completely blew up in agency over COVID. So that was one of the good things that came out. So no, it was all really interesting. I suppose the new one of buyer's agent as well. And that was a new category this year. And a lot of people going out to look at a house wouldn't be aware that a buyer's agent exists. And I think I told you the story that I'd met somebody at a viewing before Christmas, and when I asked just general chit chat, I said, how many houses have you looked at so far? And she said, well, this is number 64 on a spreadsheet. And I thought, right, you've another bit to go, because she really doesn't know what she wants. She's going all around the city. She sees a house at a particular budget. She's somebody who really could do with a buyer's agent. And I spoke to her and I said, did you hear, have you ever heard of a buyer's agent? And she said, oh, that's way too much money for me. And I said, well, actually, if you look at the time and the money that you've spent going around the city every Saturday, now maybe it's a hobby for her. I don't know. But, that's something that was nice to see this year as a new category.
Do I'm really glad you brought that up, actually, because I think the buyer's agency was the most necessary new category that went in this year. And just when you talk about that particular lady having seen place number 64, I remember when I was writing the Irish Property Buyers Annual, one of the things that I actually put in very high on the list of what not to do is not to view so many properties that actually you are, when you go to an agent and say, yeah, this is my 64th property, generally it means that you don't know what you're doing, you don't know what you want, and you're essentially using the estate agent's time to figure it out. And that's really unfair, because everybody's time has a cost attached to it. So actually, I do think that I think that buyers today are more savvy. They are better with their research, but actually I think they do need to be really respectful of people's time. If something is vastly outside of budget, don't waste people's time, because actually you're losing credibility with the estate agent. So actually, when there comes a time when you are ready, if you haven't had your mortgage in order for the first year that you've been viewing properties, you've definitely lost credibility with that estate agent. So I think buyers do need to get their house in order, and it's good to look at lots of different properties, but you need to be doing it in a focused way, that actually when you're looking at things, you're either confirming what you want or confirming what you don't want, but you're doing it in a strategic way. But this hit and miss just damages your credibility. But by the way, obviously I'm biased in this, but I think every buyer going out should be using a buyer's agent. And actually, I think it's worth noting that the shortlist for the awards came out in the last couple of days. So the buyer's agents, I know there was quite a long list, which we were really surprised by. And we were delighted, and we really welcome this. But maybe pass on our congratulations to those who made the shortlist. So we have Liz O'Kane, Ireland's original house hunter, who started the movement decades ago. So I was delighted to see her in the mix. Andrew Ratkin, who's doing such a tremendous job for inexperienced home buyers now, and sharing so much knowledge on social media that even people who aren't in a position to pay his fees gets to benefit from a lot of the learning. Absolutely. And I think that's really important. And then you've got Clement Heron in Portlaoise there, who's really kind of dominating in the Midlands, and he's bringing decades of expertise into the marketplace, and that's the kind of expertise that buyers, inexperienced buyers, and busy buyers just don't have access to. So congratulations to those shortlisted there for the first ever buyer's agency category. And by the way, that's not just the first time it's in the National Property Awards, it's the first time there's ever been a buyer's agency award in any award in Ireland. So we're really excited about that, and hopefully it will actually educate buyers to say, okay, there's a new category here. And actually, while we're congratulating people, we should probably congratulate those who made the Future Leader shortlist. And this was, again, another interesting one. So we've got Hugo Deegan, Ronan O'Reilly, and Magella Galvin, and they were just the Future Leaders was really one of the most inspiring categories to look at, because we talked about how to attract talent into the industry, and what's very clear is that the people who are coming in are so passionate about it.
Yes.
Did anything stand out to you about that particular category?
Yeah, they're just young, and they're enthusiastic, and they're out there, and they're showcasing their skills, and they're great role models for anybody else who want to come into the industry, that say, well, look, they've done it, why can't I?
Yeah, and do you know what? The marketing side of it is huge, and embracing social media. And sure, of course, I would say that. What's the old expression to man with a hammer, everything's a nail, and that's probably how I feel about digital communications. But it is true. You're providing so much value. I love that our marketing in real estate in Ireland is very education led. It's very so it's not just, hey, I have this lovely house. It's, hey, have you seen this area? Do you know what's available in this area? Do you know that these are the government grants if you're looking to buy a home? And I think that's really good for the industry. And actually, maybe this is a good time to congratulate the marketing teams who made the shortlist there. We've got the marketing teams from Cairn, from Clonee Developments, from Glenbeigh Homes, and from Hegarty Properties. And again, I think it's really good to see that you've got publicly listed companies head to head with independently owned estate agencies from right across the country. So we're definitely getting that regional spread, which I love. And again, obviously marketing, I'm fairly biased in my areas that I love. So this year, I actually the PropTech Award, I was really surprised by, because PropTech in Ireland, we know through PropTech Ireland, is still a small enough category, although it's growing. But this year they had a huge number of entrants. So this is actually one of the really challenging categories to judge this year. So in terms of you operational on the ground, were you familiar with many of the PropTechs that came and many of the solutions?
But some of them have kind of been around a while, and you kind of think, all right, they've been around a while, but the presentations were really good, and you looked at them with a new eye and kind of said, "Oh, right, okay, is this something I could look at again?" So yeah, very impressive. Lots of entries.
Actually, it's really, that's an interesting perspective to hear, because I probably am familiar with so many of the prop techs because we would have mentored many of them over the years. And I was really struck by that as well, that actually the entrance we got, and the really, really strong entrance, there wasn't the same, or it wasn't the novelty factor that pushed them. Actually, what we're seeing now is a real maturing of the
Mm,
prop tech sector in Ireland. So actually, these are companies that have been around a long time, some of them longer than
yes.
10 years. They've got great traction in the marketplace. They're being really steadily used and relied upon by estate agents and letting agents and property management companies. And so that, I think, was the real surprise for me, because I think even last year we were still maybe in a little bit of novelty stage. So actually, again, pass on our congratulations to those shortlisted for the PropTech Awards, and they include I Am Sold, Key Holder, Offer, and Property Button, and they're all kind of, with the exception of one of those, they're kind of household names across the industry in
Mm,
Ireland and well established. So actually, I think that I'm hoping that will really serve as an inspiration for others, maybe who are at an earlier stage and still trying to get that market traction. And, estate agency doesn't have a great reputation for jumping on innovation, but I do believe that's changed in the last few years.
yes.
And Mary, you don't have to tell me. You don't have to tell me this, but I'm curious. As an agency owner, through the applications process, did you see any piece of technology and say, oh, I might try that. I might look into that?
Yeah, I did. Now I remember I'm very small and I do mainly lettings and not sales. So
But you did. Okay, so that means, okay, the
yeah.
property awards are doing their job. They're actually
Put it this
showcasing
way, I
innovation.
looked at one and I said, "Oh, I looked at that a while ago and I've kind of forgotten about it. Let's explore that again." So
Right. Okay. Well, actually, then I'm going to repeat all of those shortlisted, just to make sure that if anybody else is listening in, if you haven't explored these, please explore them and see could they be a solution for you and your team. So that's I Am Sold, Key Holder, Offer, and Property Button. So I suppose they're kind of they're the areas that I'm always very focused on. But on the asset management and the letting agents, let's look at the asset managers, or the asset management companies of the year shortlisted were Aviva and PGIM Real Estate. Again, big household brands that are just so good at what they do. And congratulations to those shortlisted. And similarly on the agency side. So we might just take a moment there to recognize Irish Agency of the Year. It's great to see Huck and MacDonald. They've been repeat winners, so it'll be interesting to see who can move them from their throne. We've got Owen Riley there again, just one of the fastest growing independent estate agents, generating their own data, just such leaders in the independent estate agency space. It's delighted to see. And I was delighted to see Liberty Blue, Regina Mangan's company from Waterford. We talked about, really not having this Dublin centric focus. So it was fantastic to see a female led independent agency that started from the ground up there. So congratulations to all of the agencies there shortlisted. Really excited to see. Of the other categories, Mary, what categories did you find kind of particularly interesting? We talked about social impact and sustainability. Is that on the radar
yeah.
of industry right now?
It is, but I don't know that it's out there. Like those projects that were submitted, I don't think I was aware of any of them. Now, maybe I'm living under a stone, but yeah, there were some really interesting ones.
Yeah.
Um, and
But
what I really liked was that they're getting in at the ground with school kids getting involved in things. So they're trying to, build it from the bottom up and get social awareness and energy awareness and sustainability from primary school level, which is something we never had.
yeah, and isn't again where we live, the built environment is our most basic, is
Mm,
our most basic need, one of our most basic needs. So I think it's so important that this happens. And I think across ESG is in danger of becoming a little bit too much of a buzzword, even though there are really strong regulatory drivers
mm,
underpinning them. So I was really excited to see in terms of we had categories for sustainability initiative, and we had Mola Architecture in there, who are really leaders. And Host in Ireland, delighted to see them in there, because that's the industry body that brings together those delivering data centres. And data centres is another sector that has gotten, maybe some undeservedly bad press. And yet we can only have this conversation. Before COVID, I would have had to bring you out to the studio in Dublin South FM, come up to the top floor at Dundrum Town Centre, and it would have taken a huge chunk out of our day. Today we're able to do this via Zoom, store it, all then circulate on social media, all because we actually, none of that would be possible without data centres. And I think there's a real disconnect in understanding the key offering that data centres provide. So I think Host in Ireland do a good job in trying to address that. So I was delighted to see them there in terms of some of the sustainability initiatives that they've done, and that one in particular is around bees. So it just shows that actually the industry is doing its bit in terms of encouraging biodiversity as well. And I see civic engineers in there as well, so excellent. And in terms of social impact, again, sometimes we have a tendency to forget that ESG, the environmental side, the E, is very important, but the social side of it is huge as well. And it's the one that maybe I feel very passionately needs to be driven. So congratulations there to the LDA, to Glenveigh and Civic Engineers. Their social impact initiatives made the shortlist. But actually, that was a really interesting category as well. And it's funny, in the past, we might have relied on those delivering social housing to deliver social impact, whereas I was really happy to see the Property Awards put them in separate categories, because we have such strong social housing deliverers through the approved housing body. So congratulations to a Housing, Galway County Council, Circle VHA, and to Oakley, all shortlisted there and doing stellar work in delivering social housing under really difficult circumstances and conditions in the marketplace right now. So a really interesting one. In terms of social housing, I think that actually there's been quite a bit in the media about essentially social and affordable housing almost competing with first-time buyers in the marketplace, and that's been quite unfair. And I think maybe the awards is a good time to look across all of the housing sector and say, actually, we need new housing in all of these sectors, all types, all tenures, and maybe we need to stop pitting providers against each other. On the property management side of it, again, that would be maybe more your area than mine. Was there anything that stood out to you in that particular category?
There was, I think, was it 3 shortlisted there?
Yeah, so congratulations to Aramark, Schnitzer Born Property Services, and to Wise Property Management.
Yeah, and it was interesting that Schnitz, I can't pronounce it. They're a company who are obviously very busy, that I'd never heard of. Obviously, I've heard of Wise, they're around for 40 years. So it's nice to see somebody that you haven't heard of and to see what they're doing. And I suppose what was particularly engaging about them is that they seem to engage with their owner occupiers or their tenants, that they meet with them once a month or whatever to find out what's going on the ground, which I thought was really nice. It's obviously quite time consuming, but it would give owners in a complex very much reassurance that somebody is listening to them. So I learned something from that.
And look, that's the whole idea. I think you and I have spoken on and off air about sometimes the industry is doing so much good and nothing comes out of it. And not that, sorry, I don't mean nothing comes out of it, as in they don't get the credit. It happens behind the scenes. And in fact, just yesterday, I was interviewing somebody who is developing an ESG platform for the industry. And when we were talking about, say, construction in particular, and looking at the social value and the social impact side of it, what was really interesting is that we found that when you went through the data points of, say, the environmental side of it, we have had to make a lot of changes in how we deliver the built environment to be able to comply with with regulations driving change towards zero carbon and certainly lower carbon buildings. But what was really interesting on the social side is the construction industry doesn't have to do a huge amount more, because actually the construction industry has always been delivering social value locally in terms of providing local employment, creating a local supply chain around local projects, in terms of, for many decades now, building companies will have their brand on local GAA jerseys. In fact, when we opened our Galway office years ago, it was one of the first things we did, because I think there's always been that ethos, even if it hasn't maybe been portrayed in the media, that actually home builders and developers regularly are local businesses. They're local providers when they're in their own area, and they contribute in so many different ways. So actually, the social and ESG is kind of one of the more interesting ones, because construction companies in particular, and real estate companies, they don't have to change a lot. All they have to do is record what they're doing, because actually they've always been providing social value. And actually, just in that place, maybe it's good to acknowledge the property developers who were shortlisted in the National Property Awards this year, and that's Ballymore, Cairn and Glenveigh. And also in terms of placemaking initiatives, Cairn were shortlisted for a really interesting project. Clwyd Housing Association, again, really interesting to see a placemaking initiative around social housing there. And also Shannon Airport. So I loved the diversity of placemaking projects, because it just showed that actually community is not just about where you live, it's actually where you work as well. So that was maybe another interesting thing. Is that something you see on the ground across maybe your membership of the IPOA? Are you seeing a recognition of maybe the importance of placemaking and providing something more than the physical building?
I think probably not, because a lot of our members would only have one or two properties, and okay, it's all around the country, but it's kind of hard to develop that to the same extent when it's on such a small scale. And now we're only talking about the people who made the shortlist, and I'd like to mention, like, there were so many great applications, and anybody who applied put time and effort and thought into it. So obviously they've had to think about their practice. So that's going to drive their practice going forward. So even if they haven't been shortlisted, they're still a winner.
Yeah,
And I
no,
know that sounds very, like every child who competes gets a medal. I don't mean it to sound like that, but like all the applicants put time and effort into their application, and it's a pity that we've had to shortlist them, but that's life.
yeah, and actually I actually think that's a really fair point, because going through the process of entering an award does give a business owner and business leader a chance to kind of step back and almost reflect on their business practices. And I hope it's helpful. Like we just skimmed through them today, but I hope it's helpful for businesses who did or didn't enter the awards to look at those shortlisted and kind of say, okay, I wonder what they're doing that actually would help me drive improvements across my business and across our team. And, I think it's great to position everybody who has, who has taken the time to enter and therefore gone through that reflection to look at their practices and kind of, show that there's a win in that. But actually, I suppose the ultimate winner there or here is really for the consumers, because actually the output of all of this for all of our work is better places to live, work, socialize and spend time. So actually the consumer of the built environment, which is everyone, is the winner when we improve our standards. And I suppose maybe one of the final things we might touch on there is something that's quite topical in the media, but also topical in response to the ongoing housing crisis, because we know that supply needs to come from all types and tenures. That actually this year, for the first year, we saw a really interesting cohort of applications and applicants coming forward for renovation, redevelopment and repurposing projects. And again, Clwyd Housing, Grayling Properties, Henry J. Lyons and RKD were shortlisted for projects, but actually we could have had triple that shortlist with such really interesting and relevant projects. And for me, this is one of maybe the most important categories this year, because projects that are looking at renovation, redevelopment and repurposing, they're things the rest of the industry can learn from. So they're the ones that we definitely want to shine a light on and say, okay, this is what's happening in this part of the country. Are there vacant or underused buildings in your part of the country that could have similar potential? And I think that's maybe one of the really interesting ones. So I suppose, we have, the judging process was a really busy one. This was the most amount of applicants since the awards started. They were such high quality. It definitely made the shortlisting process more challenging. But on the positive side of it, it shows that the industry is leveling up, particularly in the last few years, in a way that we really needed it to, we wanted it to, and they are embracing technology. And, quite frankly, a couple of years ago, I was starting to get disheartened that was never going to happen. So I think using the tools that are available, and I suppose I'm conscious that while I look to the regulations as being the drivers, or, the new technology, and actually trying to encourage people to jump on it, I think maybe your perspective is maybe a little fairer to the industry, that the industry has always been doing its best, and that it rises up as service providers, not just in line with regulation. Before we finish up, Mary, just because you are an agency owner, as well as being the chairperson of the Irish Property Owners Association, how important is something like the awards for the industry, for the I suppose the sentiment across the industry, for the pride in the occupation, which, as we've noted, has been lacking?
I think it was like, I was at the awards dinner last year, and it was just a really nice night of everybody coming together. Okay, there were winners, there were losers. Everybody put on the brave face, but to actually even apply means you're putting yourself out there and you're subject to scrutiny. So, it's just, I suppose, we're all kind of working our own little, to use the word, silo, and we're all, focused on what we do day to day, and you mightn't see what else is going on out there. And I just think it's a really nice showcase of everything that's good in Irish property.
Very good. And, Mary, I think it's really fair to make the point that you're on the judging panel this year, so you won't get the recognition. So I'm going to give it to you now. You have been doing amazing work in your capacity as chair for the Irish Property Owners Association. It is so important that landlords are able to have pride in what they're doing, that they're delivering to, when they're delivering to high standards. And by the way, we know that there's a gap between those who are doing it right and those who aren't. And so when we talk about it here, we are talking about those who are doing it right, that are genuinely service providers trying to do a good job. And I think your advocacy for property owners through the Irish Property Owners Association has been really stellar in the last year or two, under really challenging and almost relentless pressure and maybe policy changes that just haven't been as responsive to market needs and to the data that as it should be. So I just want to say, if there was a category, I would definitely have liked to see you shortlisted, Mary. But thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking the time today, because I know you're very busy with your own agency at Janus Estates. So thank you for taking the time to do this. I always appreciate the chat and your insights, and you sharing your insights and your experience. So thank you so much. That was Mary Conway, chairperson of the Irish Property Owners Association and judge at the National Property Awards 2024. My thanks to producer Katie Tallon and to the production team at Hear Me More Media, and huge thanks to our show sponsor, daft.ie, Ireland's most visited property website. And thank you indeed for tuning in. We'll catch you on the next episode of the Property Roundup. In the meantime, please be sure to check out all of the other Irish and international real estate and construction shows here on iPropertyRadio.com. And we look forward to seeing you at the Intercontinental Hotel at the National Property Awards Gala dinner on February 29th.